Tonight, at some point, you're going to walk into a room, and for half a second, it's going to feel like you've already lived that exact moment. You won't ask for it. You won't see it coming. It will just arrive. Scientists have a word for it, déjà vu. But knowing the word doesn't explain why it happens or why it feels so specific, so certain, almost eerie. By the end of this video, you'll understand three things. What's actually happening inside your brain when déjà vu hits? Why it feels like memory, even though it isn't one, and why the people who experience it most often are, statistically, some of the healthiest brains on Earth. Let's start with what déjà vu is not. It is not a memory. Even though it feels like one, your brain never actually retrieved a real past event. There's no video file being replayed. There's no forgotten moment resurfacing. So what is it? Dr. Akira O'Connor at the University of St. Andrews has spent over a decade studying déjà vu in laboratory conditions. In 2018, his team found something strange. They used hypnosis to implant false familiarity, then scanned participants' brains as the feeling hit. The frontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for double-checking memories, lit up first. Not the memory centers, the error-checking regions. That's the twist nobody expects. Déjà vu isn't your memory malfunctioning. It's your memory system working correctly, catching a false alarm before it becomes a false belief. Think about that for a second. Your brain isn't broken when déjà vu happens. It's auditing itself in real time. Here's what's fascinating. That auditing system, the one flagging false familiarity, appears to weaken with age. Children barely report déjà vu at all. By the time you're over 60, it becomes rare again. It peaks between ages 15 and 25, right when your brain's memory-checking machinery is at its sharpest. So if you're young and it happens to you constantly, that's not a glitch. That's your brain being unusually good at its job. But here's the part that gets stranger. Why does it feel so specific? Why does déjà vu almost always happen in ordinary places? A hallway, a kitchen, a conversation with a friend. Dr. Cleary at Colorado State University ran a series of experiments in 2012 using virtual reality. She built scenes with the same spatial layout as other scenes participants had already seen, but changed the objects, the people, the lighting. Nobody consciously recognized the layout. Déjà vu spiked anyway. Her conclusion: your brain isn't recognizing the moment. It's recognizing the shape of the moment, the geometry, the pattern. A hallway that bends the same way as one you walked through years ago is enough to trigger it, even if you've completely forgotten the original hallway ever existed. Your brain remembers structure long after it's forgotten content. That's not a flaw. That's efficient design. This is where it starts to touch something bigger than a party trick of the mind. It starts to touch how your brain handles time itself, and this is usually where the science gets less talked about because it's harder to prove and easier to get wrong. So consider this a pause point. Take a breath. Because what comes next is the part most people never hear. Some researchers believe déjà vu isn't just about recognizing patterns, it's about a tiny malfunction in timing, not memory. Your visual cortex and your memory encoding regions don't always fire in perfect sync. Occasionally, there's a split-second delay between when information enters your brain and when it gets tagged as new. In that tiny gap, the second half of the input can arrive just late enough that your memory system briefly treats the present as if it were the past. You're not glimpsing a parallel timeline. You're catching your own brain's internal clock skip half a beat. Even today, with brain scanners and control groups, nobody has fully mapped how often this delay happens or why some people experience it as often as once a month, while others go years without it. Here comes the reframe. That tired feeling you get in the evening. The fogginess before bed, the moments where your thoughts blur together, déjà vu spikes during exactly those states. Dr. Christine Wells at Cleveland State University surveyed hundreds of participants in 2015 and found sleep deprivation, stress, and fatigue were the three strongest predictors of a déjà vu episode. Your overworked, underslept brain is more likely to briefly stumble over its own timestamps. So the next time it happens to you, right before you fall asleep, or during a long, exhausting week, that's not a coincidence. That's your tired brain briefly losing its grip on the exact millisecond something became now instead of before. You've felt this. You've stood in a doorway, frozen, certain you'd lived that exact second before, and quietly wondered if something was wrong with you. Nothing was wrong with you. Your brain was doing quality control, slightly late on a system built to catch mistakes before you ever noticed them. Wait for it. Because here's the part almost nobody talks about. Deja vu isn't rare, it's nearly universal. Roughly 60 to 80% of people report experiencing it at least once in their life. The sensation you assumed was strange, maybe even a little embarrassing to admit out loud, is one of the most common shared experiences of the human mind. You are not glitching. You're not broken. You're not tapping into something mystical. You're watching your own brain do the most human thing imaginable. Try to keep a perfectly accurate account of what's real, and occasionally, for a fraction of a second guess itself. Here's a natural place to pause the story and let that sink in before the ending, because what's left is really about you, not the research. Ancient humans likely felt this too, standing at the mouth of a cave, staring at a fire they swore they'd seen before. They had no researchers, no fMRI machines, no vocabulary for prefrontal error checking. They just had the feeling, the eerie certainty, the shiver running down the back of the neck. They probably called it a vision or an omen, or a memory from a life before this one. You call it a name borrowed from a French phrase meaning already seen. Same sensation, different explanation. The mystery got a label, but the feeling itself never changed in tens of thousands of years. And maybe that's the real point. For thousands of generations, humans have stood still in ordinary moments, hit with a wave of impossible familiarity, and quietly wondered if their mind was showing them something they weren't supposed to see. It wasn't a vision. It was never mystical. It was your brain proving, quietly and constantly, how carefully it checks its own work, even when you never asked it to. So tonight, when you walk into that room, and for half a second it feels like you've already lived it, don't brush it off as strange. That half second is your brain at its best, catching itself, correcting itself, reminding you, quietly, that the machine keeping track of your entire life is still paying close attention, even to the parts you never notice.